Now that most everyone's been able to get through and get their food, and so we'll go ahead and get started with our keynote speakers. I have the pleasure of introducing Michael Pemberton, who is from Georgia Southern, who's going to come and do the official introductions with fun, he said. And so I will turn the podium over right away to him. Michael?
Good afternoon, everybody. It is my honor and privilege to introduce the two plenary speakers for this session, Dr. Kathleen Yancey and Dr. Art Young, internationally known scholars and researchers in rhetoric, writing studies, and writing across the curriculum. It's particularly fitting and appropriate, as many of you know, for the two of them to speak to us here today, as they are former faculty members and departmental colleagues from Clemson University. Dr. Yancey was the R. Roy Pierce Professor of Professional Communication from 1999 to 2005, and Dr. Young was Robert S. Campbell Chair in Technical Communication, Professor of English, and Professor of Engineering from 1987 to 2010. The two of them organized and co-hosted the 8th International Writing Across a Curriculum Conference held here at Clemson University in 2006. Their transformative research, landmark publications, cutting-edge pedagogies, influential mentoring, and dedicated service to the profession have helped to shape the field of writing studies and writing across the curriculum. And for this, they have each been recognized and honored by the Conference on College Communication, Composition Communication, with its highest accolade, the Exemplar Award. Dr. Young receiving his in 2002, and Dr. Yancey hers in 2018. Their individual accomplishments offer additional evidence of the remarkable impact our speakers have had on the profession and the appropriateness of these awards. Dr. Yancey is the Kellogg W. Hunt Professor of English Emeritus and Distinguished Research Professor at Florida State University, where she taught since 2005. She is the author, editor, or co-editor of 16 books, including Assessing Writing Across the Curriculum, Diverse Methods in Practice, Composition, Rhetoric, and Disciplinarity, and ePortfolio as Curriculum, Models and Practices for Developing Students' ePortfolio Literacy. She has twice received the Council of Writing Program Administrators Best Book Award in 2008 and 2016. Additionally, she has published well over 100 peer-reviewed book chapters and journal articles about issues in writing studies, such as transfer, threshold concepts, writing assessment, the history of writing studies, writing technologies, and the list goes on. She has also delivered well over 100 keynote, invited, and plenary presentations at institutions and conferences in all parts of the country. And since this apparently wasn't enough to fill every available day in Kathy's professional calendar, she has also served as president of the South Atlanta MLA, president of the Council of Writing Program Administrators, chair of NCTE's college section, chair of the Conference on College Composition and Communication, and president of the National Council of Teachers of English. Dr. Young's professional history is equally impressive, in no small measure because he's generally regarded as one of the founding figures of the Writing Across the Curriculum movement in U.S. education. Beginning with his first conference presentation at the 1973 Four Cs in New Orleans on writing for engineering and technology, Dr. Young pursued a lifelong interest in the contours of disciplinary discourses and the impact that writing, both formal and informal, can have on learning, cognitive development, and professionalization in every discipline and every field of study. With his colleague at Michigan Tech, Dr. Toby Fulweiler, he laid the groundwork for WAC pedagogy and faculty development in landmark books such as Language Connections, Writing and Reading Across the Curriculum, Writing Across the Disciplines, Research into Practice, and one that I've been familiar with since I was a graduate student, Programs That Work, Models and Methods for Writing Across the Curriculum. He has written, edited, or co-edited a total of 8 books and more than 50 peer-reviewed chapters and journal articles, dozens of reviews and shorter pieces, and given invited presentations and workshops at over 140 different institutions across the country. His dedication to professional service is no less impressive, as he has held leadership and advisory roles for organizations such as the 4Cs, MLA, the Educational Testing Service, the Council of Writing Program Administrators, and NCTE, and served as a regular reviewer for major journals and scholarly presses in the field. His groundbreaking research and scholarly publications over a long and productive career led to his being named a Distinguished Fellow of the Association for Writing Across the Curriculum in 2022. I do need to mention at this point that the most recent CV I was able to locate for Art was dated in 2013. And I did want to make sure that I didn't leave out any of his more current accomplishments. So following best practice for academic researchers, I turned to that unimpeachable resource for locating the most accurate, up-to-date information available on the web, ChatGPT. And I'm so glad I did, because I learned things about Art that I'd never known before. I learned that even though his CV claims he got his MA and PhD from Miami University, he'd actually earned them at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. And in what might be a surprise to David Bloom, it turns out that Art was actually the president of NCTE in 2002. And finally, in what might be an especially big surprise to Art, as well as his wife, Donna, and I quote from ChatGPT, Art Young passed away in December 2015. But his legacy as a pioneering scholar in the field of composition and rhetoric lives on. So given what we now know, we should be exceedingly grateful that he has managed to be with us today. And so on that note, I would like to introduce the illustrious Dr. Kathleen Blake Yancey and the apparently immortal Dr. Art.
Can everyone hear me? Doing all right? Thank you, Michael, for that generous and wacky introduction. And welcome all my colleagues that are here, all of you. I'd like to introduce my wife, Donna Reese, who was also my collaborator, and Donna created all the visuals that you'll see during my presentation today. I hope to give you today a glimpse of the history of writing across the curriculum through the lens of my own experience. My professional story begins before I ever heard of WAC. I received my doctorate in 1971 from Miami University after completing a dissertation in British Romantic literature entitled Shelley and Nonviolence. I wrote it in 1970. At the time, the students at Kent State were killed protesting the Vietnam War. The only tenure-track job offer I received came in a phone call from the head of humanities at Michigan Technological University, a school I had never heard of. But I quickly said yes. Only then did I get out a map and find MTU was located in the city of Houghton in the northern reaches of Michigan's Upper Peninsula bordering Lake Superior. That phone call began 17 years at Tech, in which I established my career as an English professor and an ardent supporter and proponent of WAC. My first year at Tech found me teaching 14 courses, 10 of which were first-year composition, and a winter with 356 inches of snow. In the spring of that year, 1972, I was appointed director of composition and I attended my first 4Cs convention to see what directing a composition program was all about. A few years later, I was appointed head of humanities, a department of about 30 faculty in English and other disciplines. I was to hire 5 new professors before school started in September. As luck would have it, the first person I hired was Toby Fulweiler, a PhD in American literature, and then I asked him to be director of composition. The next summer, Toby attended a 3-week-long NEH seminar called Writing in the Humanities, where he learned from faculty workshops from Leo Dell and Dixika Swami, and about helpful books by Peter Elbow, Janet Emming, and Ken McCrory, as well as by James Britton and his colleagues in England. This remarkable NEH workshop became the germinal experience of Michigan Tech's WAC program. Toby was excited to put into practice what he had learned about writing across the curriculum and the process of expressive writing to transactional writing, with a focus on writing to learn. In October 1977, the Humanities Department arranged a 2-day interdisciplinary writing workshop at the Keweenaw Mountain Lodge in Copper Harbor, about an hour drive north, yes, I said north, from campus. There was no budget. The 16 faculty members that signed up were each supported by their home departments. At this first WAC workshop, conducted by Toby and a colleague, faculty explored ways to integrate writing in their classes. They wrote and shared their writing in small groups and revised their writing in the evening in their cabins. In those days, there were no cell phones, email, internet to distract faculty. From written evaluations, we knew the workshop was a success. At the same time, Tech's new provost challenged me and other department heads to develop a plan to improve the communication skills of engineering students. The Dean of Engineering proposed that all students take a technical writing course in the junior year, taught by English teachers, of course. Students would then take a scan time test, and those that failed would take a remedial course, taught by English teachers, of course. The Humanities Department proposed an alternative approach, a comprehensive university-wide writing program with these premises. Communication education is the responsibility of the entire academic community. And 2, it must be integrated across departmental boundaries and be continuous during all 4 years of undergraduate education. Our proposal was supported by a grant from the General Motors Foundation. We would continue to do 2-day workshops, but added a 4-day workshop version in the summers at the Ford Forestry Center south of Lawrence, Michigan. Yes, we gave General Motors money to Henry Ford Legacy Campus. That's the way things worked back then in Michigan. Faculty stayed in cabins that housed forestry students during the school year. The GM provided a token honorarium of $50 to each participant, as well as housing and meals. Our interdisciplinary WAC workshops emphasized writing to learn new and difficult material, and to read, write, speak, think, and solve problems like engineers or historians. Although our workshops were valued by those who attended the WAC workshops, it was not always a smooth ride. The Faculty Senate at Michigan Tech, led by faculty in the School of Business, conducted an investigation into our comprehensive writing program. And none of these faculty had attended a WAC workshop. They had heard rumors about expressive writing, keeping journals, and a touchy-feely curriculum that promoted, or at least tolerated, flaws in grammar, spelling, and punctuation. They demanded in this proposal that the Humanities Department return to teaching the basics. Fortunately, the proposal was defeated, but narrowly. Scary to think about even now. We continue with interdisciplinary workshops. Many of you will recognize the concepts of writing to learn and writing to communicate as the pedagogical foundation of writing intensive courses. Faculty at the workshops experience both kinds of writing and realize these concepts flow back and forth into each other. Teachers generated their own perspectives on written language and developed writing assignments for their particular classes. In 1987, with the encouragement of Dixie Goswami at Clemson University, I accepted an offer to join the faculty at Clemson as the Robert S. Campbell Chair in Technical Communication and Professor of English and Professor of Engineering. A program to improve the communication skills of engineering students was already in place and supported by both engineering and English faculty. I joined this effort. 2 years later, with the financial assistance from the Campbell Endowment, I cautiously decided to see if faculty might be interested in the writing across the curriculum concept in every discipline, not just engineering. I announced a full-day workshop at Clemson's outdoor lab, several miles from the main campus on Lake Hartwell. I was surprised and pleased that 60 faculty from across campus signed up. These interdisciplinary workshops became the centerpiece of Clemson's WAC program. In 1991, I proposed to Roy Pierce, president of the class of 1941 at Clemson, a Center for Professional Communication to support the university's growing WAC program. We discussed the importance of oral communication in the workplace, and we revised the concept from writing across the curriculum, WAC, to communication across the curriculum, CAC, adding also visual and digital communication. Roy and Marnie Pierce established an endowment, and Carl Lovett was appointed the first director of the new Pierce Center. He and I worked closely for the next decade to strengthen and expand the center's impact on faculty and students on campus and beyond. Throughout the 1990s, the Pierce Center supported workshops and other activities for faculty and students. By the mid-90s, Clemson faculty focused more on the possibilities of using digital communication in the WAC classroom. Donna and I developed this visual to illustrate the dynamic and overlapping areas of expressive writing, conversational writing, and academic writing. Colleagues from numerous disciplines began to collaborate and experiment on what we referred to as interactive learning, or the space between personal expressive writing and public formal writing. In this social learning space, novice engineers or historians begin to mature as users of academic and disciplinary language. Emphasis is placed on using written language to learn new and unfamiliar content and to strengthen analytical and creative habits of mind. In conversational writing, students write to a real audience or their classmates, of their classmates, or to a teacher as mentor, responding to questions and suggesting possibilities for further knowledge or further clarity. This brief excerpt that I'll do from the international exchange among students will serve as an example of conversational writing and learning. Magnus Gustafsson from Chalmers University of Technology in Gothenburg, Sweden, who is here today. Donna Reese, hi Magnus, yeah. Donna Reese, then of Tidewater Community College in Virginia, and I designed an electronic discussion among our students on English translations of 3 poems by Swedish poet Thomas Tranströmer. Our goal was for the students to learn disciplinary content and to create disciplinary knowledge and to increase students' confidence in writing about literature to audiences known and unknown. As it turned out, a few years later, Transtrunger won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Over a 2-week period, in groups of 6 or 7, students from each of our classes wrote and responded to letters on a blog. All students wrote in English. Adrian, an engineering student at Chalmers in Sweden, wrote, quote, "Something that disturbs me in all the translations is the use of the word moth as a translation for nephral. Maybe there's no such, Magnus has been coaching me on how to pronounce that, and I don't think I did it right. Maybe there's no such word as night butterfly in English, but I think that would give a more accurate translation to the overall mood of the poem. I don't know how you react, but I don't get a pleasant image when I read the words crawl like huge moths." End quote. Karen, an MA student from Clemson, wrote, quote, "I appreciate Adrian's reference to night butterfly. There is no similar word in English. Unfortunately, huge moth doesn't have quite the same poetic softness and luminary quality. The night butterfly imagery, especially coupled with the shade of his blue lamp, changes the whole feel of the last stanza." End quote. Wayne, a general education undergraduate at Tidewater Community College, wrote, quote, "Let's not forget the disaster of the moths. As Adrian said, it is really a shame we don't have a word for night butterfly. Perhaps firefly is better. And with the summer and humidity we have in Virginia, I fail to see the appeal that July would have in Sweden. For those of us who don't like the oppressive heat, July hardly evokes a time when we could breathe easy. This serves to illustrate that not only the author's context, but the reader's context will affect interpretation of the work." End quote. Writing across the curriculum premises about engaged writing and learning informed our design on this online exchange. Students included their own questions and insights, and even shared artwork and music related to their understanding of the course material. Here at Clemson, by the end of the decade, several hundred faculty have participated in CAP workshops. Were there any difficulties along the way? Of course. One dean routinely told junior faculty not to spend too much time on teaching, because getting grants was much more important, suggesting that, quote, "taking time to attend a workshop about teaching will actually count against you at tenure time," end quote. Scary, yeah. One teacher said, "Students hate my class now. Can you imagine what would happen if I required writing?" In 2000, Time magazine selected Clemson as the public college of the year based on our CAP program. At the time, I couldn't help that pun. At the time, we did not know we were a finalist. We did not even know there was such an award until it was announced to the public. The innovative and sustaining work of Carl Lovett, director of the Pearce Center for the entire decade, and faculty from a variety of disciplines had achieved unintended national recognition. Today at IWAC 2023, Clemson's Pearce Center and its CAP program continue to flourish under the leadership of Cameron Bushnell. IWAC and Clemson share a long history. In 1993, 95, and 97, Carl Lovett, representing Clemson, collaborated with Sylvia Gamboa from the College of Charleston and Angela Williams from the Citadel to co-direct the first 3 national writing across the curriculum conferences. These conferences in Charleston, South Carolina, became an important and sustaining forum for teachers to come together to learn new program possibilities, best teaching practices, and ongoing development of WAC theory and research. In 2004, Marty Townsend at the University of Missouri, who is here today, expanded the conference emphasis to IWAC, International Writing Across the Curriculum. In 2006, Kathy Yancey, who directed the Pierce Center at Clemson from 2002 to 2005, and I co-directed IWAC at Clemson. Today, in 2023, we participate in the 16th biannual IWAC conference, 5 of which have been hosted or co-hosted by Clemson. And as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the IWAC conferences, we look forward to imagining the next 50 years of the academic movement that I consider the most significant educational advancement in my lifetime. Thank you.
Good afternoon. We can do better than that. Good afternoon. Thank you. It's great to see you. It's great to be here. I want to thank Michael for the kind introduction. And be alerted, there's more GTP3 on the way. I want to thank Cameron for the invitation to return to Clemson, which has been a real treat. And I want to thank my associate here for her help with my presentation as well. You can see from the slide before you. You can see from the slide before you that my focus today will be on tracing WAC's projected braided trajectory, community practice, research, and theory. Art did a wonderful job of helping us understand the role of community in the formation of WAC in lots of different contexts. And as you'll see, I'm going to focus principally on practice, research, and theory as I take up the question, which is before you. What do we understand and gain from conceptualizing WAC's development, history, and future as the function of a braided structure? And I hope that the slide, it didn't go. Let's make it go. It's not going. Is it? The clicker has attitude. Okay, great. Talk among yourselves. Try again. Oh, good. Yes, as we know, as we were. Yes, the a braid has a kind of structure. It's referred to as a plait, as you know. It's a complex structure or pattern formed by interlacing 3 or more strands of flexible material. We think of it principally probably in terms of hair. Pamela Flash was braided yesterday, I noted, but also it's used in lots of material science, as it turns out, textile yarns, for example, and wire. And I'm thinking about it, the usual way we understand WAC, I think, often is through stages. I'm going to refer to that in a minute, but I want to think about it as a braided structure. And I want to suggest that the major thread in that braided structure, which is also not working again, there we go, are 2 questions. What is writing and what does it mean to write? So my argument here basically, or my sense of things, is that those 2 questions, especially what is writing, have been in the background and sometimes in the foreground throughout the history of WAC, and that they will guide at least some of our future going forward. I want to confess that my sources for this are in some ways personal in nature. When I was in college, I was told when I tried to use headers in an essay that I should not do that, that only weak writers use headers, that strong writers use transitions. Good to know. When my husband did his graduate master's project, 137 pages of it, they were all, not surprisingly, in passive voice. But I was an English teacher and I knew he needed sentence variety. So I changed for the sentences, and don't you know that his director found every single one of them and turned them back, which also allowed me to say, what is writing? Probably the worst damage I did was to my daughter, who in 5th grade did a science project proving happily that when you put plants in the sun, they grow, and when you put them in a closet, they don't. So good news. the bad news was that when the feedback came to her, they wanted to know why she didn't have any graphs in her papers. That's because she is an English teacher as a mother. So I want to fast forward to where we are now. On that particular screenshot, I hope there's a screenshot up there. There we go. Is a screenshot now. Is basically of a collaborative writing project with people who live across the pond whom I've never met. That writing is different from writing with headers, I would argue, as one can be. I'd suggest as well not to be too meta about it, but this slideshow we might consider to be writing. And by the way, if we do, what that means is that writing moves, all of which allows me to say, what is writing? If we go back to the beginning of WAC, which I hope is where we are. Oh, we're back, we're too far. There we go. We know that initially it was thought of as a tool for writing. Teresa Red, for example, reminds us that the primary tenets of the WAC movement are writing to learn and learning to write. Sue McLeod expands on that by connecting writing to critical thinking and also by enlarging the WAC movement, as we heard from Art, into the role of teaching, especially helping students move from being passive consumers of the education that's delivered to them to becoming active participants in collaborative situations, making their own knowledge. There is, however, I said, another way of thinking about WAC, which is stage-oriented. It's a kind of historical approach. It's very common. So the first stage, Art spent a lot of time talking about the first stage, which he was absolutely not only a part of, but a leader of. And around the late 80s and early 90s, many people thought that the second stage of WAC was ending, as you can see here. I don't know why there's all that activity. I'll just say that would make a good research project for somebody, but there was a lot of it. The particular piece that I want to key on was from Chuck Baserman. And you can see he's got a review here where he's talking about 4 books that are looking at WAC. And what he says in those 4 books is that one of them in particular he thought was most useful, and that was a book edited by David Jolliffe. And he calls out a chapter that was authored by Chris Hansen, who is also here today, because Chris talked about WAC in 3 domains, if you will. The actual writing of the disciplines, the writing pedagogy in disciplinary classrooms, and the role of writing in the development of individual students. I think that's a very handy scheme for thinking about WAC and for also linking that to the question, what is writing? And so that is the way that I formatted the rest of the talk, as you will see, beginning, however, with individual writing development. And because individual writing development, especially in terms of writing to learn, as we've just heard from Art, was so important, we see it here in John Gregor's piece, Learning Economics, where he points out, as you can see in the piece, the role of economics and his writing to learn effort there in helping students, again, becoming active agents of learning. There's using writing to learn statistics. There's writing to learn in astronomy. And all of that's to say, however, that it wasn't always smooth. Again, as Art told us, there were often bumpy rides, as Marty Patton and her colleagues told us in their experiences at Missouri. But the role of writing and development of individual students in terms of writing to learn has not gone away. It has taken new forms, and I would suggest one of those new forms has to do with its relationship to high impact practices, which, as we know, comprises a set of practices that are associated with student success in terms of retention and graduation. And we see evidence of this in a recent issue of Across the Disciplines that was devoted to the role of WAC in high impact practices. We also see it, interestingly, there's an article by Brian Hendrickson that may or may not come up. It's not coming up, is it? No. I'm sorry. Oh, the computer's doing, yeah, it's got a blue box, which is bad. A red box might be good, a blue and bad. Well, I'll go on. You don't have to see the quote. It's Brian's article is called Studying and Supporting Writing in Student Organizations. And the salient point is that WAC has moved out of the classroom to include co-curriculars, for example, a point that my Elon colleagues and I will be talking about tomorrow. And then the last one